This week, if you draw every day, you will be able to demonstrate basic drawing techniques, learn how to see and draw relationships, learn to see angles, and produce freehand perspective drawings. Let's take a look at some paintings from the past and see how artists have handled the illusion of depth. It is evident in early cave paintings that humans were always fascinated with depicting the world around them and how they fit into this world. In this image, you can see depicted the animals that early humans may have hunted or had to hide from to survive. One can see that these early artists struggled with showing depth. Though there is some overlapping or layering, one cannot be sure if it is intentional or not. The scale of the lions, as compared to the rhinoceros, seem to have no relation. The overall image appears very flat. This fresco shows that people have developed a better sense for creating the world around them. However, there is still a lack of depth. The various elements seem to stack on top of one another rather than falling back behind each other to show a proper use of depth. This can be seen in the ocean and the ship that appear over top the land formation. The scale, as well, seems to be off. Notice the size of the buildings as compared to the people, dolphins, and ships. Though the primary purpose of Egyptian imagery was for storytelling, it is still very flat. Everything seems to appear on one plane. The use of scale amongst the different elements is to show importance rather than depth. In other words, the larger the character, the more important they are in the Egyptian society. Here, in the Battle of Issos, we can see how the use of overlapped figures has started to be used to show depth. Though there are still some issues with scale, the overlapping alone does wonders in creating a sense of depth as compared to earlier works. In this medieval mosaic, we can see that artists are starting to experiment with perspective. Notice the door and fountain to the left side of the image. Artists are showing multiple sides of the base of the fountain, and the bottom of the door seems to angle towards us. However, the top of the fountain and the top of the door don't quite match up with the bottom. There still seems to be a long way to go in showing a sense of depth on a two-dimensional surface. Looking at this nativity scene, we can see that Giotto is more successful than his predecessors. The manger itself has a decent sense of linear perspective, though still not entirely accurate. Another issue continues to be the scale of the various elements. The size of the people is inconsistent, and things still have a sense of being stacked on top of each other. Linear perspective is definitely being used much more effectively in the altarpiece. All of the angles and lines seem to show an understanding of one-point perspective, though the ellipse of the round table in the middle panel seems to show that the tabletop is a little tilted towards the viewer. The use of scale, in terms of things being smaller in the background, is also showing improvement. However, the angel and Madonna seem a little cramped in the middle panel. The artist is also depicting a lot of detail in the background imagery, which can also flatten an image. So here we have certain aspects that work effectively in showing depth, while others are working against this. By the time we hit the Renaissance, the masters are able to show us why they are who they are. In the Betrothal of the Virgin, Raphael shows us not only that he has perfected his use of linear perspective, but also his use of overlapping, scale, and use of atmospheric perspective. Notice the desaturation of colors, as well as diminished detail in the background as compared to the foreground. This Da Vinci painting shows an even better use of atmospheric perspective. The mountains in the background really show a sense of recession. The mountains as compared to the tree in the foreground almost seem miles away. After the Renaissance, the standards for great art were based on the artist's ability to depict realism. This remained the standard for a few hundred years. In 1826, the invention of the camera did something to change our view of how to judge art. With the camera, you did not have to be a master artist to be able to realistically depict the world around you. Patrons of artists now had another option other than commissioning an artist to paint a landscape or family member. This in turn allowed artists to explore other options in their work. Artists were no longer judged by their ability to create realism. The Impressionists, like Monet, focused on the effect of light striking a surface. Matisse focused on the true nature of shape and attempted to create a sense of three-dimensionality by using flat colors. Picasso had many phases. His Cubist phase focused on deconstructing the human form, breaking it down into simple shapes, and creating effective compositions. Dali's fantastic landscapes depict various forms and objects melting and floating over dreamlike landscapes. He was a surrealist that obsessed over the subconscious mind and how it is in the subconscious that true art developed. With the development of computers, many artists have once again started focusing on a sense of realism. The artist still needs to develop an eye for what creates a sense of realism. However, computers allow the artists of today to recreate the world around us in a way never seen before. It is truly amazing to see how the line between reality and art has been blurred. Take a long look around the perimeter of a room. Look at the edges of all the things in the room. Chairs, tables, and objects will be included in your drawing. Pick a starting point and very slowly construct a line around the perimeter of the room, moving from shape to shape. Try to get the entire room in an outline around the edge of the paper. Do not erase any lines. Once you put the pencil on paper, just continue with the one line until you have drawn the entire room and its contents. Last week, you learned about proportions, scale, and atmospheric perspective. This week, we will discuss more about seeing relationships and creating space. The next skill you need to learn is to sight angles relative to vertical and horizontal. This skill requires the artist to pay attention to ratios and comparisons. It requires that one confront and deal with paradoxes. Let's look at an example. We know that a ceiling is flat, and the corner is a right angle. However, on the picture plane, the edges of the ceiling are not horizontal, and the corner angles are not right angles at all. It is your job to see relationships on the picture plane and mark what you see. So as you begin to do the exercises in portfolio pieces, remember that angles are compared to the constant vertical and horizontal, and sizes are compared to the constant basic or main unit. Place a chair in the middle of the room. This will be the basic or main unit, by which all else will be measured. You will be using vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines to complete this exercise. You will draw lines from the chair across the floor to the next object on the left, and then draw lines to the objects on the right. Lines construct the height of the objects on the left and the right by comparing them with the height of the chair in the middle. Continue locating everything in the room with lines drawn across empty space to where all other objects sit. These lines will go horizontally, vertically, and diagonally around the room, creating the distance on the paper that will indicate the amount of space between the chair and everything else. The lines are not an outline, but rather a unit of measurement. Do not outline any objects. Leave them unconstructed and formed only by overlapping lines. Sit across the room from the chair. Go to the opposite end of the room with your sketchbook and pencil. On your paper, draw a line that shows your eye level. Map out the chair first with vertical and horizontal lines. Draw the room by comparing each object with the chair. Determine the height of the other objects by measuring them against the chair. Use a line to show the distance other things are from the chair. Draw lines across empty space from one object to another. Draw the space behind the chair. You have just translated space. This is not something that comes naturally. We have to learn to sight what we see and draw it in perspective. You can sight angles by holding your pencil either vertically or horizontally and comparing the angle with the edge of the pencil. You can use your viewfinder and transparency the same way. You can draw crosshairs on your transparency or use the viewfinder you made in a previous exercise. Visual information seen on the picture plane will almost always be different from what you know about the subject matter that you are drawing. You must draw angles just as you see them. This will ensure that the ceiling looks flat and the right angles of the walls appear to be correct in your finished drawing. Sit in front of a corner of a room. Gesture the space in front of you 3 to 5 times, but do not worry about proportions, scale, or angles just yet. Put aside your sketchbook for a moment. We will use your transparency as a picture plane to look at angles. Hold your transparency in front of the corner and use your transparency to mark the corner of the room. Then draw a horizontal line across the transparency through the corner. Pick the best of your gestures in your sketchbook to continue this exercise. You can do this one of 2 ways. The first is to draw directly on the transparency while viewing, then check it by placing it directly over your gesture. You can also just use it to check and change what you have already drawn. You have just drawn a corner in perspective. Try it again without the aid of the transparency. Move to a different corner or a different position. Do 3 to 5 gestures of the corner of the room. Pick your best gesture to continue drawing. Mark the corner and draw a light horizontal line across your paper. Take a sight on the horizontal corner using your pencil. Close one eye and hold your pencil perfectly horizontal at the corner. Make changes to your gesture angles until you get them correct. Using all of the skills we have covered, seeing edges, seeing spaces, and seeing relationships, you will now complete an outdoor perspective scene showing good proportion, negative space, and perspective. We usually associate perspective with the drawing of boxes or rectangular forms in space. Circular objects obey the same laws of perspective and offer similar challenges for artists. Do you have difficulty drawing bowls, glasses, vases, or other similar forms? Many people find it hard to get the round openings of these objects to look correct. Unless we look directly down on the opening of a circular vessel such as a drinking glass, the circular form we perceive assumes the shape of a partially flattened circle or ellipse. Take an empty drinking glass and hold it away from you in your outstretched hand. Begin by looking directly into the opening of the glass. Notice that this is the only position in which the opening appears round. Slowly bring the glass to a vertical position and pay attention to each step and how the opening gradually flattens into an ellipse until only a straight line is evident when the lip is horizontal. Assemble a group of round objects of varying sizes: bowls, plates, cups, and vases. Choose 3 or 4 of the objects to use for the rest of this activity. Place them upside down on cardboard and trace the tops. Using a ruler or straight edge, draw a square that tightly encompasses the circle. Then, draw bisecting vertical and horizontal lines that divide the square and circle into 4 equal parts. Cut the squares out with scissors. Pick one of the cardboard squares and see how the circular shape changes. Pay attention to the cardboard circles as you complete this activity. Place them on top of the vessels that they belong to, and tape them to the vessels so that the openings line up directly with the drawings. Arrange the objects on the table together so that at least one of the vessels is in front of the rest, and each of the edges are touching one another. Concentrate on how the shape of the circle is affected by the angle of your vision. Do several gestures of the composition, and when you are ready, complete a version of the still life, paying attention to the following: edges, spaces, light and shadow, relationships, and perspective. You will do a freehand perspective drawing of a cityscape from observation. Remember, perspective is all about angles. You need to sit in front of the buildings you want to draw. If you do not have access to buildings, find some images on the internet that interest you. Just remember that although it seems easier to draw from photographs, it is better for you to draw from real life. Take your time with this activity. Do at least 5 gesture drawings before beginning your final. Use horizontal and vertical lines to help you correct the angles you see. Before starting, look at the work of Lionel Feininger and Piet Mondrian. Feininger used the angles of buildings by extending them to create a flat yet dynamic picture plane. Mondrian reduced the elements of the cityscape to their basic essence, only using variations on the vertical and horizontal accents in the composition to give a pure state of proportion, which creates a sense of harmony. Redraw your original 2 times on separate paper. For the first drawing, extend the diagonal, horizontal, and vertical lines of your building. This will create a series of shapes that did not exist before. Pick some of the spaces you created and add a dark value to them. These will recede into space. Add lighter values to other areas of the cityscape and stop when you think you have completed a visually sound composition. In the second drawing, you will be simplifying the buildings even further. This drawing should be based purely on horizontal and vertical lines, much like Mondrian's work. Erase any diagonal lines and then decide how thick or thin the vertical and horizontal lines in your new composition will be. You can imply a sense of space using scale, weight of line, overlapping, and value. Develop and organize in your own way. Do the following post-instruction drawings. Compare your pre-instruction drawings next to your post-instruction drawings. You have now completed week 4. This concludes the beginning drawing class. We have only touched on the basics, and it is up to you to continue practicing every day. Becoming an artist is a lifelong endeavor, but you are now well on your way to reaching your goal.